Hello again, and welcome to the Adept Werewolf build video. This build utilizes a sorely underrated set to attain great mobility and survivability while also still packing a punch. So, for this build, we're using a Nord Templar. Nord and Templar both offer extra resistances, while Nord gives extra health and stamina, while also providing some additional ultimate generation on taking damage. While Templar also gives us additional spell damage, it gives us cost reductions, and increased survivability outside of form. So for attributes, we're using 34 points into health and 30 into stamina. That's going to put us just shy of 38,000 hit points when buffed with a food buff, and roughly 34,000 stamina while in werewolf form. For a food buff, we're using the Bewitched Sugar Skulls. This is going to give us a line of max health, a line of max stamina, and max magicka, as well as a small amount of health recovery. You can also switch these out for any of the other tri-stat foods, you just won't get the health recovery, and it'll be slightly lower stats. But ultimately, they all kind of function the same. For our Mundus, we're using the Atronach. Now, the reason for the Atronach, and this is one that a lot of werewolves actually miss out on, is that we are able to easily get stamina back as a werewolf. We get extra stamina from our heavy attacks, and our heavy attacks are honestly a great use of the form, but we don't have a way to get the magicka back, while magicka is actually our survivability. Magicka is heals, and magicka is also extra stamina recovery, so it's important to be able to regenerate that magicka. And that's the reason that we're using the Atronach. Now, for our actual build itself, for the equipment we're using, our first set is going to be our damage set. This is the Greatsword of the Essence Thief. This is what's on our werewolf bar. This is using a weapon damage enchant with the sharpened trait. Now, I've used Essence Thief in previous builds before. It's a loaded set. It's got 2 lines of max stamina. It's got a line of weapon and spell damage. And the 5-piece creates a pool, a little glowing pool of light that whenever you touch it, it will restore 5,317 health, restore 4,300 stamina, and increase your damage done by 10% for 10 seconds. Now this is a very loaded 5-piece bonus. So it's a small heal. It is a stamina recovery, which 4,300 every 10 seconds works out to roughly 800 stamina recovery on a 5-piece. That is a huge amount of stamina. Even if you're not picking those up at the very second that they spawn, as long as you're catching them before they despawn, you are essentially tacking on 800 something recoveries to your character sheet. And then a 10% damage increase is a 10% damage increase. It's essentially Major Berserk, except it's unique. You can actually stack this with Major Berserk if you have another source of that. It's going to make you hit hard. That's really what it's about. The reason that we're using a Greatsword instead of a Maul is that outside of form, this is going to give us additional spell damage, which is going to assist in our survivability and our damage outside of form while we're still building up ultimate. And because while in form, we don't actually get access to the 2-handed passives that give us penetration from a Maul. So our back bar weapon is going to be the Maelstrom's Restoration Staff. You can run an Essence Thief Restoration Staff if you'd like. It's not required to run this if like you don't like the arenas or whatnot. But Maelstrom Arena is relatively easy to run on normal. It just takes some time. The reason that I'm running this is for the 2-piece giving my regeneration a magicka restore. So if you're using radiating regeneration, that's going to put regeneration on multiple targets. Every time that it critically strikes, you get 558 magicka back. So it's a great way to improve your magicka recoveries while you're outside of form, whenever you're trying to essentially survive to get into werewolf form. Our mythic is going to be the Gaze of Sithis. This has kind of been the de facto werewolf mythic since it's come out, at least pre-High Isle. And if you don't have the High Isle expansion, this is still going to be your go-to, generally, as a werewolf. In this case, I'm using a maximum stamina enchant with the impenetrable trait. So this set, or this mythic, gives additional health, it gives health recovery, it adds a lot of armor, but it reduces your block mitigation to 0. As a werewolf, you're generally not going to be blocking much because you're going to be moving around a lot. So that's not a huge downside for you, but that extra armor, the extra health, and the extra recovery does make a big difference. 1025 health recovery, while it's not as strong as it used to be in a werewolf, that's still going to be essentially a 500 health heal every 2 seconds. For our chest, we're using the Adept Writer's Cuirass, and this is where the name of the build comes from. This is the set that people really don't expect. So we're using the Cuirass with a reinforced trait because that gives us the maximum amount of armor that we can get out of this piece. And this is the highest armor piece that you can run, is the chest, with the maximum health enchant. So this set gives us 2 lines of armor, it gives us a line of maximum health, and it gives us Major Gallop and Major Expedition at all times. So that is a 100% uptime on Major Expedition. That means that you are going to be just at base in werewolf form, moving at 60% over your movement speed, your normal movement speed, at all times. This is going to allow you to outmaneuver your opponents. It's going to get you around corners and into cover faster, when things get hairy. Movement speed is really survivability in today's meta. You can have all the armor in the world and you can still be blown up. If you get enough people on you, or you get like a Dragon Knight with a corrosive armor after you, because that just goes straight through it. But the movement speed will save your life. For our shoulders, we're using the Magma Incarnate's Pauldrons. That's the heavy variation of them. We're using it well fitted with a maximum health enchant. You can also use the Baron Thirsk shoulders. I believe they also give the magic and stamina recovery, but ultimately what you're looking for is one of the monster sets, one of the one-piece monster sets that has the magic and stamina recovery lines on it. For our waist and our hands, we're using the Adept Rider medium pieces. This is to bump up our spell damage a tiny bit more. It's an additional 2% per piece, so it's going to be an extra 4% spell damage. Each of these is running the maximum stamina enchant, and they're both well fitted. For our legs and our boots, we are using the Adept Rider heavy pieces. So this is going to be a 5 heavy build. Legs are going to be using the maximum health enchant, and the feet are going to be using a maximum stamina enchant. Also well fitted on both of these to improve our roll dodge and sprint whenever we need to. Our jewelry is all going to be Essence Thief. Each one of these is going to be running the spell damage enchant, and the reason for that is that we are on a Templar. Templar has a passive in one of the trees that whenever you cast an ability from that tree, it gives you minor sorcery, which is going to be an extra 10% spell damage. Now you don't get this while you're in werewolf form, but outside of form it's going to be, a decent amount of extra spell damage. It's actually like 8% less than what you'd get from just being in werewolf, because werewolf gets that extra 18%. And since the hybridization changes, werewolf doesn't care if it's spell damage or if it's weapon damage. It's going to increase your damage the same either way. So we're really just looking to maximize our usability outside of form with this, with spell damage versus weapon damage. Now on the neck, or 2 pieces of the jewelry rather, so I'm running the neck and the ring with Swift. This is going to give us an extra 14% movement speed at gold. And then on our final piece, I'm using Bloodthirsty. The reason I'm using Bloodthirsty versus Infused is that the actual weapon and spell damage increase at lower health is going to be significantly higher than I get with Infused. And since I'm running these 2 pieces, With Swift, I really want that extra weapon damage, or spell damage in our case, to kind of get that, that final punch in on somebody to finish them off. Infuse does give you extra spell damage for outside of form, which can help your heals, but ultimately what we're looking for is some way to finish fights, which is something that Werewolf has a bit of a problem with, not having an execute. So this kind of functions as a way to buff up that damage and really finish somebody off. So, for our skills, outside of form, as a Templar, we're using a more or less a standard kit for a Templar. Using Radiant Depression, which is going to act as our execute outside of form. It deals a ton of damage. If you catch somebody low with this, from range, you can just melt them. Get oppressed. You can use the Toppling Charge to work as a gap closer. It's going to deal some damage and set them off balance, which is great for recoveries if you need to get some stamina back. It also interrupts them. Using Biting Jabs, which is the stamina morph of Puncturing Strikes. It's going to deal damage in an area in front of you. It's going to slow your target or the nearest target, and it's going to give you Major Brutality and Major Sorcery, which is the source of that for us on this build, outside of form. We're using Purifying Light, which is the Magicka, or which is the, Magicka version of the Backlash ability. The reason we're using this versus Power of the Light is because whenever it goes off, it's going to provide a heal to anybody that's nearby. So it's 2,145 health every 2 seconds for 6 seconds. And that's roughly the same strength as a Radiating Regen, which is, you can actually keep yourself alive pretty well just by keeping this ability running on your enemies. And at the same time, this actually copies more damage than Power of the Light. So you don't get the minor breach that Power of the Light offers, but you do get additional damage that's dealt. And for our last ability here, we're using Camouflaged Hunter. Camo Hunter is going to give us Major Savagery and Prophecy, which is going to be an extra 26-29 weapon and spell critical rating. And then whenever we deal critical damage from an enemy's flank, we gain Minor Berserk for 5 seconds. So it's going to help us to kind of damage our enemies. And that's in addition to being an ability to allow us to pop stealth enemies out of stealth. And of course, this is the bar that we're using the Werewolf Ultimate. On our back bar, we're using Radiating Regen. If you're not running this and you're running the Maelstrom Staff, you're doing it wrong. Because that is the whole point of the Maelstrom Staff. This is going to provide 20,000 healing over 10 seconds, at least at base here, to you or up to 3 nearby allies. So basically 3 targets per cast. This is going to help your survivability. It's going to help other people's survivability. If they stay alive, generally speaking, it's easier for you to stay alive as well. And each one of those people that gets hit by it has a unique chance to crit, so every time that it crits, you're going to get Magicka back. Using the Stamina Morph of Rune Focus, this is going to give us our Major and Minor Resolve, or Major Resolve outside of Werewolf form, increasing our physical and spell resistance by about 6k. And it's going to give us 242 stamina every 1 second. This is a unique stamina recovery, so it actually goes through block and sprint. So even if your stamina recovery has been reduced to 0 by some effect, this is still going to recover stamina to you. And then if you're within the rune, it gives you a heal, which is a pretty significant heal with the amount of health that we're running. We're using Extended Ritual, which is a cleansing ritual morph. This is going to cleanse us of up to 5 harmful effects and heal you and nearby allies for 2,600 health every 2 seconds for 24 seconds. So it lasts a long time. It's got a huge area, 12 meter radius. And then this is also going to give your allies a Purify synergy to cleanse themselves of harmful effects. Now for them, they actually whenever they use that synergy, it gets rid of every harmful effect. So if they've got 20 effects on them, they're all gone. Whereas with you, you've got to cast it 4 times to get that same effect. But it's still a great heal. It's great utility. We're also using Honor the Dead as our burst heal. This is going to heal yourself or somebody in front of you for a significant amount of health. And then if you heal anybody that's below 75% health, you get 18% of the ability's cost back every 2 seconds, over 6 seconds. Our final ability is going to be Living Dark. This is actually going to be receiving something of a nerf in a few days with the High Isle patch, but it's still going to be worth running regardless. It's got a 6-second duration. It's going to be going up to 10 with High Isle. This is going to reduce the movement speed of anybody that hits you for 3 seconds. It's going to heal you for 2,000 health starting on the High Isle patch. It's just it's a strong self-heal. It's a strong survivability tool. It's good to use. Now I have Crescent Sweep slotted here. You can slot really whatever you want. Ultimately, you're not going to be wanting to use this. You're going to be using your front bar werewolf, right? So we're taking all of the passives that affect us in werewolf form, and I missed that one. All of the passives that are going to affect us outside of werewolf form, rather. So that is going to be the Forceful passive, the Heavy Weapon passive, the Follow-Up, and the Battle Rush passive. The Balanced Blade passive does not affect us as we're not using any two-handed abilities. Restoration Staff, same thing. Take all of the passives. As you can see here, I still haven't leveled up to max. Still have great survivability outside of form. Just take them all. Medium armor, you can take everything but improved sneak. If you want improved sneak, you can take it. It doesn't help you in werewolf form, but it can help you outside of form if for whatever reason you have to stealth up. And of course with the heavy armor, you're going to take all the passives there as well. For werewolf, our skills are going to be, let's see, here we go. Brutal Pounce as our gap closer. This is also something of an execute bleed, because it does scale up its damage as enemies drop in health. But this is going to deal a small amount of bleed damage whenever you hit. It's going to hit your target, and it's going to hit anybody in the area. It's got a 5-meter radius. And then if you activate it again within 5 seconds, it's going to cast Brutal Carnage, which is going to apply a bleed to anything that's in front of you. It's going to deal that damage over 10 seconds, and it's going to give you 100 weapon and spell damage for each enemy that you hit. So you can stack this up to 6 times, 600 weapon and spell damage at base. So in Werewolf, you're going to be getting actually 38% more than that. So you can actually stack up a significant amount of damage using this ability. Now it does eat up a lot of stamina. 2 casts of this is over 7,000 stamina. So don't use this as a spammable. You will stam yourself out, but do make sure you are keeping Brutal Pounce up if you have the stamina available. For our Infectious Claws morph, we're using Claws of Life. Now a lot of people use Claws of Anguish, which is going to apply Major Defile. The reason that I'm using Claws of Life over that is that I am receiving a lot of healing off of this. If you get this on 3 or more targets, it's actually a pretty decent heal over time. Whereas the Major Defile for 4 seconds, really easy to get through. It can be cleansed. You can wait that 4 seconds, you can line of sight for 4 seconds and it's gone. And if you're spamming your claws to try to keep somebody from healing, you're going to run yourself out of stamina really quickly. But this is going to deal damage to an area in front of you, as well as disease damage over time. And because it's Claws of Life, you're going to get healed for 122%, at least with the loadout that I have, over that time. So all of the damage that's done is going to come back to you as healing. Using Hell of Agony, this is pretty standard. This is going to deal a significant amount of physical damage up front. In form, I think I've got a tooltip of roughly 13,000 with this. If the enemy is facing you, that's going to take 25% more damage, and this does stack with the 10% from Essence Thief. So you can start howling people for a lot. It's going to hurt, it's great pressure. And it's also relatively inexpensive considering most werewolf abilities. Sitting at 2,600 stamina, fairly cheap. Our heal is going to be Heresine's Fortitude instead of Heresine's Rage. So Fortitude is going to give us more healing than the Rage morph. It's actually 60% of your 60% of your max health versus 50%, or is it 50 and 40? Either way, it's more. But it's also going to give us stamina and health recovery. So on the High Isle patch, this is going to be changing from stamina, 5% of the healing caused, to minor fortitude and endurance, I believe, are the two. But the minor recovery buffs of the same ability. If you're at full health, this is going to give you stamina. And we are using the Deafening Roar Fear morph, or Roar morph. So this is our Fear. It's going to fear up to 6 enemies. It's going to set them off balance for 7 seconds. And it's going to apply Major Breach and Minor Maim. So it's going to reduce their physical and spell resistance, and it's going to reduce their damage done by 5%. So this is not only more damage for you, but it's extra survivability as well. And for the Werewolf Ultimate itself, we're using Pack Leader. Pack Leader is great for solo or for small group, especially if you've got one other wolf that's running Berserker or Pack Leader. Either way, you're both going to get the max time. But the reason for Pack Leader is going to be the Direwolves and the 10% damage reductions. This is a unique damage reduction. This will stack with other effects like Major Protection, Minor Protection. And those Direwolves will each apply Maim and Snare targets. They don't do a ton of damage, but they are an annoyance, and they can be useful for finishing somebody off if they get that those debuffs on them. And this is also going to apply Minor Courage to yourself and nearby allies. So it's going to be an extra 215 weapon and spell damage. So, finally, for our champion abilities, there are going to be some changes with this next patch. Fortunately, they're not going to affect us too terribly much. So, in the blue tree, our first champion point slottable that we're using is Focused Mending. So this is going to be an additional 10% healing done to your single target heals. Your Howl is a single target heal. Your Claws of Life is a single target heal. So this is just going to be a straight 10% extra healing done. So if you've got this slotted, it's basically like having 10% more health, since your heal scales off of your health. Also going to be using Duelist Rebuff. This one is going to give us a damage reduction for single target attacks. So one thing that a lot of people miss is that dots are single targets. So if you have this on you, you're going to get a damage reduction to things like Molten Lip, as well as Venomous Claws. For instance, if you're fighting against a Dragon Knight. It's going to reduce both of those. I'm also using the Untamed Aggression slottable. This is going to give 150 weapon and spell damage at max. You can also use the Wrathful Strikes instead. This is going to give more weapon and spell damage than the Untamed Aggression, but this one is going to give us that weapon and spell damage to our healing as well as our damaging abilities. So this would be slightly better for damage in Werewolf, and this would be slightly better for damage and survivability overall. And then for our final blue Slottable, we're using the Deadly Aim. This is going to be for our single target damage. Now, as a Templar, our main spammable is not single target, but our focus is going to be on damage as a werewolf, where our Howl of Agony is a single target ability. This is going to be nerfed in the next patch down to 6% at max, but it's still going to be a very strong option as a Slottable. In the red tree, we're using this Slippery Slottable. So Slippery is going to give us an automatic break free every 21 seconds. It helps with our stamina recovery or our stamina sustain because this is a free one. Every 21 seconds you can break out of somebody's stun automatically without costing you a thing. In the Survivor Spite tree, we're using the Pain's Refuge. This is going to reduce our damage taken for every negative effect on us. As werewolves, we can't cleanse those effects, so this is just going to be a straight damage reduction for us. So, at 20 negative effects, which is remarkably easy to get hit with, you're going to get a 20% damage reduction, and that's not only to the effects that are on you, it's going to be all incoming damage. So if you've got your heals going, if you've got your claws going, while you have all these effects, you're going to be rather tanky. One thing to keep in mind is that we do not want more than 10 points in the Mystic Tenacity passive. Elemental status effects are going to play into the Pain's Refuge Slottable, so we want them to last longer than shorter. So a 5% reduction is fine, and we need that to get to the Slottable, but no more than 10. Other than that, we are using the Celerity Slottable. This is actually really important for this build because we are going for a high mobility build. This is going to give us a 10% movement speed increase at all times. It's a great Slottable. I use this in all of my builds because movement speed is truly king for werewolves. And our final red Slottable is going to be the Rejuvenation Slottable. This is going to give us 90 health, magic, and stamina recovery. You can use the Sustained by Suffering Slottable as well. This is going to give more recovery, but the Rejuvenation Slottable is always active, whereas Sustained by Suffering is not. So if you are line of sighting people and you don't have negative effects on you, you're still going to get this recovery. Green Tree is really up to you. There's not too much here that's going to be super useful. Rationer is going to give you extra time for your food buff, so you're not eating as many sugar skulls and getting fat because of all the sugar. And Steed's Blessing is going to give you an extra 20% movement speed outside of combat, which will get you, to fights faster if you're moving around as a werewolf. War Mount and Gifted Rider are both two that I enjoy using. War Mount removes stamina costs outside of combat, so you can sprint endlessly on your mount, and Gifted Rider is going to give you an extra 10% mount speed, but ultimately these two don't actually help you while you're in combat. So yeah, that is the Adept Werewolf build. If you like this build, give it a try. It's a lot of fun. If you want to see it in action, I posted a recent video of a 2v8 outnumbered fight that I had with it. It performed wonderfully. But yeah, if you like it, give it a try. And don't forget to like and subscribe.